Welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. Namaste. We begin again after quite a long break with chapter 13, the divine Maya. As always, you read first.
Yes. So we'll read the first paragraph and see what he's saying. Then we'll come back to each sentence if necessary. The divine Maya. By the names of the Lord and hers, they shaped and measured the force of the Mother of Light, wearing might after might of that force as a robe. The lords of Maya shaped out form in this being. The masters of Maya shaped all by his Maya. The fathers who have divine vision set him within as a child that is to be born.
Rig Veda.
From the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda's language is very obscure, it's not at all very. And some those translations sometimes leave you wondering what exactly is being said, but still you can understand somewhat what he's saying. He's talking of the lords of Maya shaped out form in this being. Basically the idea is Maya is the creative power of the divine. The unmanifest divine, the Satchidananda, which is unmanifest, when it has to manifest itself, it needs to have the power to create forms, because manifestation implies forms which are visible and available to the senses. So, Maya is the power of the divine to create forms, and Satchidananda gives to supermind this power of creating forms. Supermind is the link between the unmanifest and the manifest. And it is supermind that has the power of Maya. Maya means creation.
So Maya has never been illusion?
We'll come to that. So, just as the other things, consciousness, force and all, at the highest level, they are in their purest forms. But when there is a manifestation, they come down into denser and denser layers of substance, and they seem to become the opposite of what they are at the highest level. So Maya also, there are two Mayas. When you see Maya at the below the overmind level, you see the world as illusion. When you see Maya in the supermind, you see it as the power to create forms and real forms. That's the difference. So there is a higher Maya and there is a lower Maya. Just as there is a para prakriti and an apara prakriti, just as there is a super nature and a lower nature, there is a lower hemisphere and a higher hemisphere. So everything seems to be divided in that way. So those who go just above, make their mind silent and go to the self. The self you can experience even in the higher mind, which is just above the reason. There you can possibly see the physical world as unreal. So, most of those who make their mind silent and get liberation have this experience of the world being an illusion. Illusion not in the sense that it doesn't exist, but in the sense of a something that is evanescent and not really substance. In the old ancient scriptures, it was described, the illusion of the world was described as a reflection in the mirror. But today we have a better image. We can think of it as the cinematics images on a screen. Are they real or are they not real? They are real enough to make you cry when there is a bad, sad scene, and enough to make you cry when there is a comic scene. So it is real to that extent. Step back a little and say, what am I watching? And you see that there are only images on a screen. So this is a very good example of what happens when you go to the self and see the world as illusion in that sense.
And even if they were three-dimensional, it would still be the same.
Yes, that's it. Exactly. All these forms that you see in the physical world seems to be like images on a screen without substance. They can easily be switched off and they don't seem to have any reality. This is Maya. But when you go to the higher level of consciousness, you see that that which you are seeing as illusion is only the outer form. They have used the words robes. The robes are the outer forms, whereas the behind the robes is the real substance. So when you go to the higher levels of consciousness, you can experience this even in the higher levels. Behind these outer forms, you see the divine reality. So it is not that the world is unreal, but it is covered up by forms which seem to be unreal. And these forms are all transitory, subject to transience. That's why they seem to be so unreal. But the presence behind these transient forms is permanent. That's a divine presence. So, we start reading now what he is saying. And there's something also interesting, just like if you want to build a house, you need masons, you need engineers, you need carpenters, you need all these. These divine beings are also there in the higher levels. Twashtri is a divine carpenter. Then there are divine builders. See, he is talking of the fathers, the names of the Lord they shaped and measured, wearing might, the masters of Maya. Okay? Shaped all by his Maya, the fathers who have divine vision set him within as a child that is to be born. So there are these subtle beings which build the world. There are. They have even names. Twashtri is the divine carpenter. So you have all there. You have divine bhesajas. That means the medicine men, the twins. The twins are supposed to be Ashwins. They are physicians to the gods. So whatever is there in the physical world, in the subtle worlds also they exist in some form or other. They are talking of the fathers and the masters of Maya.
There's a very interesting passage in Savitri. It may not be the same, but where he says that there are two beings who accompany us through life, one on each side, in the quest.
Yeah.
What are those beings? Who are those beings?
I don't remember the passage exactly, but it's interesting. In which, in the quest?
In the quest, yes.
Okay, I'll have a look. So, we read the first para. Existence that acts and creates by the power and from the pure delight of its conscious being is the reality that we are, the self of all our modes and moods, the cause, object and goal of all our doing, becoming and creating. As the poet, artist or musician, when he creates, does really nothing but develop some potentiality in his unmanifested self into a form of manifestation, and as the thinker, statesman, mechanist, only brings out into a shape of things that which lay hidden in themselves, was themselves, is still themselves, when it is cast into form, so it is with the world and the eternal. All creation or becoming is nothing but this self-manifestation. Out of the seed there evolves that which is already in the seed, pre-existent in being, predestined in its will to become, prearranged in the delight of becoming. The original plasm held in itself in force of being, the resultant organism. For it is always that secret, burdened, self-knowing force which labors under its own irresistible impulse to manifest the form of itself with which it is charged. Only the individual who creates or develops out of himself makes a distinction between himself, the force that works in him, and the material in which he works. In reality, the force is himself, the individualized consciousness which it instrumentalizes is himself, the material which it uses is himself, the resultant form is himself. In other words, it is one existence, one force, one delight of being, which concentrates itself at various points, says of each, "This is I," and works in it by various play of self-force for a various play of self-formation. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So, this is Maya, what he's saying. He's comparing to the artist who brings out, the painter who brings out only that which is inherent in himself, he brings it out. It is exactly in the same way the divine also is manifesting what is already inherent in him. He is comparing it also with the seed and the tree. The tree is already involved in the seed and that is coming out, exactly. So the world is an expression of the divine. He often uses the word expressive manifestation.
So, a question on the poetic side. Those poets that just use the physical mind or the mind and don't go any higher.
No, it depends on the quality of the poet.
Okay.
So those poets who are really great, they receive inspiration from many sources. Amal's overhead poetry book is there, in which he says it could come from the psychic, it could come from the pure vital, it could come from the universal vital, it can come from the higher mind, it can come from the element mind, it can come from the intuitive mind, it can come from the overmind, it can even come from the supermind. In fact, Savitri, much of it is from the supermind, obviously. Now, what is interesting is, how does Sri Aurobindo say these lines are from the intuition, these lines are from the psychic, these lines are from the... how does he say all this?
Because he did this with Narad and Amal.
Yes, no, not only that, from the quality of the vibration of that particular world. When those vibrations he feels, he knows those vibrations are coming from here, he knows the vibrations are coming from there. It's the quality of vibration that tells him from where it is coming. Because at each level, the vibrations vary. So that's how we can easily identify and say, this is from here, this is from here.
But he was always careful not to say that any of his was supramental.
Yes,
Until at the
he's
end,
very careful.
Little bit.
Yes, but we can assume, maybe with faith more than reason, but we can feel that, of course, Savitri is something unbelievable, fantastic. So, this is basically what he is saying here. The Maya is the power of the divine to create forms, and what it is creating is not something new and which did not exist earlier. It is existing already in the divine in a unmanifested form. So it is just bringing out all these things, just like a writer. He has mentioned only, he has mentioned the thinker. No, he has also mentioned the poet, artist, musician, and he's also mentioning thinker, statesman, mechanist. Interesting, he's even using the word mechanist. Okay. Then, that's all he has done here. But there's an essay, The Philosophy of the Upanishads. It's a 60-page book where he has gone into 3-4 pages describing how the comparison between the divine creating the world and Shakespeare creating his dramas. He gives about 10 or 14 similarities. First of all, that which is all the Shakespeare wrote maybe about 14 plays, but he could have written many more. So the divine can also create not only this world, but he could have created 100 other worlds. The potential for creating all those, that's the first comparison. Second thing, that which is coming out is his own expression, that he has also said. Then many other things, that which is Shakespeare's dramas are in form. The world also is form. And so like that he has got, I've forgotten all the points that he's made, but there are 15 points of comparison between the divine creating the world and Shakespeare creating his drama. The process is the same. That which is within him, he brings it out.
But it has to be truly within the poet or the musician
Yes.
To create something special.
Yes.
Because anyone can write a
Yes.
tune.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. It depends on where it is coming. The higher it goes, it is going to a more real creation. There can be even simply a rhyme maker. That's it's a useless thing. Okay. So, in fact, Rudyard Kipling was also a poet, and Sri Aurobindo has had a lot of fun. He, in one letter to Amal, he says that I refuse to accept this jingling stuff as poetry. He has written so many. So, this is what he's saying in this one para. Okay, and he's also saying the original plasm. Now that's an interesting thing, and he's also comparing with what the poet needs. Okay, we'll read that again. Okay, he's saying only the individual who creates and or develops out of himself makes a distinction between himself, who is the creator, the force that works in him, and the material which he works. So when the poet is creating, he is the creator, and the force that is creating him is separate from him, and what he is created, he needs and the material which he works with. A poet is working with maybe a synthesizer, or a poet is working on paper, he needs a material. That's exactly interesting, because Sat, Chit, Ananda, that's exactly what the divine also has at his disposal. He has Sat, which is substance. And with that subtle substance, he creates gross substances here. That is Sat. Then Chit is knowledge. Chit is consciousness. You can equate it with knowledge. So he has a knowledge of how to do this. Just as a mechanic also would know exactly, he must have the knowledge how to do what he has to do. The poet also must have the technique within him, the knowledge of the technique how to do it. The musician, I can't produce music. A musician has to have the knowledge of how to produce the music and the rules and all. So this is what he is saying. So Sat Chit Ananda is exactly that. Sat is the substance, Chit is the technology, the knowledge of the technology, how to do it. Force obviously you need, and while you are doing, the poet also enjoys himself and the divine also is enjoying himself. That is Ananda. So this is the comparison that he is making. Okay. And then towards the end it's interesting. In other words, it is one existence, one force, one delight. Existence is Sat, force is Chit Shakti, delight is Ananda. Of being which concentrates itself at various points and says of each, this is I, and works in it by various play of self-force for a various play of self-formation. So the one divides himself into infinite beings, starting from the atoms, individual atoms. Those atoms also, each one has the divine presence in it, but in a sleeping condition. Then the evolution starts, it goes on up, and this is the multiplicity, and he is not satisfied by creating and finding himself back again only in one person. He is doing that through 7 billion people. So that's what he's saying, this is I. In each individual, he says, this is I. Okay? And works in it by various play of self-force. Each individual is being created in a different way for the great enjoyment of multiplicity, the great enjoyment of variety. There is no boredom, there is no oneness at this level. Infinite ways of enjoyment, infinite ways of creation, infinite ways of consciousness and force. So, he's talking of the Maya. What it produces is itself and can be nothing other than itself. It is working out a play, a rhythm, a development of its own existence, force of consciousness and delight of being. We'll read the whole para first. Therefore, whatever comes into the world seeks nothing but this, to be, to arrive at the intended form, to enlarge its self-existence in that form, to develop, manifest, increase, realize infinitely the consciousness and the power that is in it, to have the delight of coming into a manifestation, the delight of the form of being, the delight of the rhythm of consciousness, the delight of the play of force, and to aggrandize and perfect that delight by whatever means is possible, in whatever direction, through whatever idea of itself may be suggested to it by the existence, the conscious force, the delight active within its deepest being. So, very clearly he is going on throughout Life Divine, insistence always referring back to Satchidananda. Existence, Sat. Conscious force, Chit Shakti. Delight, Ananda. Sometimes he uses different words, but he is always referring back to this Satchidananda. It is Satchidananda that creates the world, not by itself, but by delegating its power of creation to the supermind. The supermind is the one that creates. Satchidananda does not create. It is the unmanifest. It says, I authorize you to create the world for me. And the power of Maya is given to supermind. Above supermind, I don't think there is any Maya. The power of creation stops. The creation, that means the motion, the movement, is all below the supermind only. Above the supermind, I don't know if there is any creation.
What does the overmind do?
The overmind is just one step below the supermind.
Yes.
And that is where the multiplicity starts. The one becomes the many. In the supermind, the one and the many are both there, potentially. In the overmind consciousness, all the possibilities that are there in the supermind, they come into existence. They start becoming millions and millions, and each thing is represented by God. So all the gods live at the overmind level of consciousness, and there are millions of gods. In the Vedas and all, we talk only of a few, but each thing in the physical world, impersonal force maybe, but they are represented by personal gods in the overmind consciousness. So that's why Sri Aurobindo says, the overmind is the origin of the many. And therefore, overmind is such a high level of consciousness, but that is the starting point of the ignorance. The ignorance, if you want to define, you can define it as the power to see the many, the multiplicity. So it is starting at that level. And that power, at our level, it becomes absolutely a necessity, and we are bound to see only the many. But in the overmind, you see the oneness as well as the many. But here we see only the many without seeing the underlying unity of things. So the Maya, he refers always back to the supermind really produces the Maya is not a creation of illusions, Maya is the power of creating real forms. But if you go above, I'll say he makes a difference between the lower hemisphere and the higher hemisphere. The lower hemisphere is our matter, life and mind, corresponding to our body, vital and mind. This is the lower hemisphere. This is a region of imperfection, and it's also what he would call the world's nature. Nature is at this level. As soon as you make your mind silent and go to the higher mind, there are 4 layers there, according to Sri Aurobindo: higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind, and the overmind. This is also mind planes of consciousness, and these he calls the spiritual planes of consciousness. So when you are in the lower hemisphere, you see the multiplicity only. When you are in these, you see both. You see the multiplicity as well as the oneness. But they seem to be separate. They don't seem to coalesce and include each other. Sometimes this is a problem, and that's why all these philosophies go on varying. At the supramental level, the one and the many become completely harmonious. They are completely consistent with each other. We'll discuss this also. There are many other things there that when the divine is creating, let's say he is creating light. Okay? He is creating light. Does he create light only of one intensity? No. Because he is infinite himself. Why should he create only light of one intensity? Like this one is only fixed intensity of light. So he creates in many types of intensities. The highest intensity, less intensity, finally slowly it becomes less and less, finally even darkness. So he is not creating the dualities, he is creating only the full range of everything. Whether it be light, or whether it be consciousness, or whether it be force, or whether it even be substance, the subtlest and the grossest. He is not creating sin and virtue. He is only creating the vibrations of that level, virtue at one end, and at the other end, it becomes sin. So we see the dualities in this physical world, but he is not creating the dualities. This was the question which we saw in the delight of existence, the problem and the solution. So that which we see as cruelty here, to him it's only an action of a certain intensity. A very kind action would be for him an action of a certain intensity, and cruelty would be a action, same neutral action at another level of intensity. That's how you raised that question last time of the Nazi concentration camps.
Yes.
How can we say that is... So from the divine point of view, there is only action of different intensities, just like light.
I asked this question to another person, and his answer was that the avatar suffers all of this, takes it all in.
Yes.
And he...
Because at the lower end, there is, this imperfection is there, and the avatar comes to cure that.
Right.
Yeah, right. That's right. Now, he is talking of the involution and then the evolution of his then. And if there is any goal, any completeness towards which things tend, it can only be the completeness in the individual and in the whole which the individuals constitute, of its self-existence, its power and consciousness, and of its delight of being. Note again, he is referring back to Sat, Chit, Shakti, and also the delight of being. All this is tending to completeness. In the physical world, incomplete is tending to completeness. But such completeness is not possible in the individual consciousness, concentrated within the limits of the individual formation. Absolute completeness is not feasible in the finite because it is alien to the self-conception of the finite. Therefore, the only final goal possible is the emergence of the infinite consciousness in the individual. It is his recovery of the truth of himself by self-knowledge and by self-realization. The truth of the infinite in being, the infinite in consciousness, the infinite in delight, repossessed as his own self and reality, of which the finite is only a mask and the instrument for various expression. So again he is referring back to that. The individual is nothing but the condensation of the Satchidananda. And it has to, at this level it is covered up with all sorts of incompleteness. It has to recover its truth of itself. He is saying, truth of the infinite in being. Being, you have to understand as, again, he uses as existence, being, and also he uses the word substance. They are all the same. Okay? So, the infinite in consciousness, the infinite in delight, repossessed as his own self and reality, of which the finite is only a mask and the instrument for various expression. He is using the word repossess. Possession is a very favorite word of Sri Aurobindo. Okay? He goes on saying, you must possess the divine and the divine must possess you. When he speaks of possession, and he is saying repossession, because originally you had it, now you have lost it, now again you must repossess it. You have to go back and get it back again. So, and possession means total mastery. When I possess something, I can do whatever I want with it. So if you possess these, that concentrate, it is under you. You can do what you want with it.
But it can only be done through the individual.
Yes, yes. And the collectivity, it can't be done. It's the individual who has to do that. And a group of individuals would absolutely necessary for the next supramental race. One individual perfected is not enough for the change to happen in the physical world, he says. In the last chapter of the Life Divine, he discusses this. There must be a whole group of individuals who are perfect. Then only a supramental race is possible. One individual, not enough force to make the necessary change. There has to be a group.
The 12 is the number of perfect manifestation.
Yes.
So if there are 12 individuals who can realize that consciousness,
Yes.
will it lead to
Absolutely. What you're saying.
change?
Yes, absolutely. Because in the beginning, Sri Aurobindo knew that to bring down the supermind and make a Gnostic race, you need a group. And first he was talking of 100 people. Okay? Then when he came to the ashram, he found that that's not very practical. He reduced his wanting to 12. But even 12 he could not find.
That's right. That's right.
And when someone is asking Sri Aurobindo, is our cooperation necessary for you to bring down the supermind? And he says, fortunately not. And he and Mother himself, they did the work. So, yes, the individual, Sri Aurobindo lays a lot of stress on the individual and his freedom. And that is the reason why he is against all state control, whether it be in economics, whether it be in politics, whether it be in free speech, whatever. Freedom is very important for the individual. He goes on stressing that. Because if you see carefully, every time mankind is making a progress, it's the individual who is doing that. There is no example of a big discovery being made by a group. It's always the individual, whether it be biology, whether it be philosophy, whether it be science, it's always the individual who finds the truth, and then it becomes common property of mankind. Even the mobile is created by an individual. There is only one interesting experiment being done now in Europe, that CERN, Center for European Research in Nuclear Science. They have got this huge 28-kilometer tunnel under the Alps, and there are 5,000 scientists working on that project. So so they are trying to find the last bit of matter. They call it the God particle. They are trying to find that. They have got a lot of data, but they are saying it will take us several years to interpret the data. But will they ever find the last God particle? No. Because there is no last particle. It goes on and on and on, infinite. Infinite above, infinite below.
Next.
So, thus, by the very nature of the world play, as it has been realized by Satchidananda in the vastness of his existence, extended as space and time, we have to conceive first of an involution and a self-absorption of conscious being into the density and infinite divisibility of substance. For otherwise, there can be no finite variation. Next, an emergence of the self-imprisoned force into formal being, living being, thinking being, and finally, a release of the formed thinking being into a free realization of itself as the one and the infinite at play in the world, and by the release, its recovery of the boundless existence, consciousness, bliss, that even now it is secretly, really, and eternally. This triple movement is the whole key of the world enigma. So there has to be an involution first, then there has to be an evolution, and there has to be a realization going back to where it came from. So this is the triple movement of the whole key of the world enigma. There has been an involution.
So before any great event on the earth, there has to be an involution.
The involution is something that happened out of time. The involution is the first created the world created at the beginning of time, or rather out of time. We can't say that the world has been created in time. It has been timeless. It is true that from the causality point of view, the divine has created the world. But it's not something in time, that at such and such a time he created the world. And before that there was no world, you can't say that. The divine has always been there and the world also has always been there. In fact, this is the big problem in science. They study the stellar bodies going out into space. The space seems to be expanding. The universe seems to be expanding. So they calculate at which speed it is expanding, and then by a reverse process bring it back to where it all began. And this Big Bang theory is exactly that. They say that so they place it at 14 billion years. But this is not very logical, because 14 billion years ago, the scientists say the world began. That is that Stephen Fleming, that fellow all bent up, but a very Nobel Prize winner.
Hawkins.
Stephen Hawking, yeah. Fleming, I said, that's somebody else. Stephen Hawking, that's right. So, but now that theory is being debunked. Because even if you think about it, why did the evolution start at that level, on that day particularly? In fact, Aurobindo says that. He has a lot of fun with that. He says, why couldn't it come 5 seconds earlier? Why did it come 5 seconds later? So this idea doesn't stand scrutiny. It doesn't seem to be logical. The world has always been there. And even science now, many scientists are saying, there is no beginning to the world. It has always been there along with the highest level. The scientist doesn't say along with God, because they don't believe in God as such, not everybody. But the world has always been there. There is no starting point for it.
Can there be an evolutionary leap without an involution?
How can there be an evolution without an involution?
Yes.
There can't be. In fact, he makes that very clear.
Yes.
Evolution implies an involution.
Right.
So those people who are talking of evolution, the idea of involution is not there for them. In science, the idea of involution is not yet there. In fact, that's why Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is only a mutation of forms, biological mutation of cells, and is creating different types of things. There isn't even a goal to it in science. In fact, there is a big discussion among scientists as to whether there is a goal to evolution, or whether it is a chaotic combination of mutation of cells creating new forms. But Teilhard de Chardin, that paleontologist, he has, of course, he was a paleontologist, he was a scientist, but he has this idea that yes, there is an evolution, it's going towards, he calls it the omega point. It's going towards a goal. The word used in philosophy is teleology. It's teleology. You are going towards a goal. But that idea is not there in science. The Aurobindo idea is very, very clear. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is that there is a biological evolution. Aurobindo's theory is evolution of consciousness. But it needs parallelly a biological evolution, so that the consciousness which is developing occupies a biological form which is appropriate to its own level. A worm cannot have a human consciousness. It can't even have the consciousness of a cat. So there has to be a biological evolution, and the human consciousness cannot be there in an ape. So man has to come. So this spiritual evolution also, there has to be another race who will be superior to man. So biologically even, it will be a different body. Aurobindo's idea of the supramental body is one which is plastic, which is one which doesn't need to eat nor to sleep. The functions of all the bodies, no organs, no stomach, no liver, no kidneys, nothing. All the functions of the body will be replaced by the chakras. Each one, the 7 chakras, they will be doing the necessary work. This is his idea of and it will be plastic. The consciousness will make the body obey it. At our level, the body is dictating terms of the consciousness. We are a slave to the body, mind and life. But in the supramental body, the consciousness will dictate terms to the body. Whatever the consciousness wants, the body will obey. So it will have powers of change of form, even maybe what is called teleportation, that also should be possible. Everything will be possible.
And what will be the relation of man to Superman? Like how will that work out?
That is another thing which he has discussed in the supramental manifestation of on earth. Aurobindo constantly talks of two things. He says either if man is capable of graduating and evolving himself to another species, fine. But if he is not capable of that, man will become like a extinct species, and Superman will replace him. He goes on thinking of that. But that possibility has now gone because Mother speaks of some being in between the two, in between man and the Superman. Overman is a word coined by our translators. I think it is mostly that George Wreckham. Yeah. Yes. Whereas there is a lot of, they say,
but Mother said
Surom, exactly. Surom. Yeah. So there will be a intermediate, like yogis, but even more than yogis. They will be at a high level of consciousness compared to the man, the normal man, but inferior to the Superman.
So will the Surum be working towards uplifting humanity to the supramental? Will that be the...
That's the work that the avatar does. That's the work that... What is your question exactly?
No, I'm saying the intermediary man.
Yes.
Will it do the work of bringing mankind or humanity to the next...
Exactly. That's exactly. Just like... That's exactly that. His function would be to help mankind to go to the next level of consciousness.
This is very clearly stated in Book 11 of Savitri.
Yeah.
Where he goes through all of this. Excellent. Mother said she wasn't sure if humanity would survive.
Yes.
But I would like to ask you a question. Now more than 60 years have passed since the supermind came.
Yes.
Do you think there are any of these beings on earth?
Pardon?
Surams?
No. I don't. It depends on what exactly Mother meant by Surams. But of course there are any number of yogis who exist in the world. There is no doubt about that. But I don't think any avatar is there at present. But there is another thing, that there are so many yogis they don't advertise themselves. Those who come into the limelight because of the press and because of the disciples who go to them. Even in India, there are so many minor men and women who are spiritual. There is no doubt about it. But not very well known. One is there in Kerala, that lady who goes about. She is known as the hugging mother.
Amma.
Amma. Yeah. Amritananda Ma. Okay. She is doing a lot of social work also and going all over the world. But certainly she is at a higher level of consciousness. How high we don't know. But there have been many in India. And genuine cases. We don't know of them. How many of them are living even in the Himalayas, we don't know. But certainly their consciousness helps mankind to progress. There is no doubt about that. But avatars, I don't think. How to know? How to be sure? But Mother has said somewhere. Mother says in the agenda, I think she says, that if there was any other person, I certainly would have known the presence of such a person.
Yes.
She says that.
Yes.
So it is doubtful if anyone was either her equal or superior to her. Very doubtful.
Do you think Nolini was just joking a little when he said that Superman is here? Maybe it's even you, maybe it's even me.
Oh, does he say that?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of that. It must be a joke.
I think so.
Because he was very, very... He was a realist. When mother passed away, there was a big problem with many. They said that no, this is not. But he was the first one to come out with the work of transformation of the body has been postponed. He had the realistic attitude and the courage to say that. Many could not accept it. Amal was one of them.
No, I know. Yes, yes.
Never did they categorically say the work is on, the work of transformation of the body. Never did they say that it will be done. What they were saying will be done is the bringing down of the supermind, and that got done. But whether the body would be transformed, she gave her body for this work and she did the work, and now that work, the body of work that she has created, has not disappeared. It is there in the subtle world. That is George Breckham's idea that up to the subtle physical, mother had been able to do the work of the transformation of the new body. And Sri Aurobindo speaks in the supramental manifestation upon earth, he speaks that one of the methods of the supramental body would be a materialization from the subtle world into the physical world. So that also is possible. Then there is another interesting thing also. When there used to be a French lady here, her name was Yatanti. It's an Indian name, but she was a French lady. She used to live in the house which is now occupied by the Aurobindo people. Okay, she used to live there and she used to teach French. One day when she had gone to mother, mother saw behind her psychic being, but the psychic being is usually described as no larger than the thumb of a man. Angushta matra purusha. But she saw the psychic being of Yatanti larger than her body. Larger than her body. And then she says, this could be what could become the supramental body. And in Life Divine, in one place, Sri Aurobindo has mentioned, Life Divine is full of treasures. We don't understand the language. But 3 words. He says that the psychic being can enlarge itself. So it's telling with what mother has seen in Yatanti. The psychic being can enlarge itself. So that could become the supramental body. And what he's saying, first, next, and finally, we have to conceive first of an involution and the self-absorption of conscious being into the density and infinite divisibility of substance, for otherwise there can be no finite variation. This is the first. Next, that is the second, an emergence of the self-imprisoned form into formal being, living being, thinking being. This is interesting. Formal being, living being, thinking being. Formal being is matter, form. Living being, animals. Thinking being, human beings. And finally, a release, and finally, that's a third, a release of the formed thinking being into the free realization of itself as the one and the infinite at play in the world, and by the release, its recovery of the boundless existence, consciousness, bliss. That even now it is secretly, really and eternally, this triple movement is the whole key of the world enigma. Involution, evolution, realization. That's a triple movement.